It's time for Brush Street Beat presented by McLaren Health Care. Today's guest is Cody Stavenhagen, the Tigers beat writer for The Athletic. Cody, thank you so much for taking the time to join us again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So let's start this off by talking a little bit about the Tigers game last night, talking about Casey Mize specifically. He had a good couple of innings, but overall not great. 6 runs on 5 hits on just a little more than 4 innings. He also had 2 walks and 4 strikeouts. This may be Casey Mize's last outing if, in fact, the Tigers do not play that doubleheader on Monday against St. Louis. That is still being decided. But if it was his last outing, what do you think of his season as a whole?
Yeah, it's kind of been a tough thing to gauge because you look at the numbers, right? He has a 6.99 ERA in his first 7 major league starts. That's not great. That's not what he wanted. That's not what, a ton of fans out there wanted. But I don't think that's necessarily cause to panic. We've still seen, as Casey Mize said last night, the fact that he knows his stuff can play at this level. I think that's important. We've seen the flashes. We've seen struggles too. Look, he's thrown a lot of flat cutters. He's kind of lost command of his split finger at times. He's struggled with fastball command. All things that made him look very much like a rookie pitcher at this level, right? But really, there's no one's harder on Casey Mize than Casey Mize. He kind of talked last night about how he's going to take this into the offseason, how he thinks this time, these struggles, let's call them that, are going to be something that will make him stronger in the long run. It's been kind of a test. It's been a little bit humbling for Casey Mize. He didn't come up here and just dominate like maybe he dreamed of, like maybe it would have been cool to see. But he still had some flashes, right? He carried a no-hitter into the 6th inning against the White Sox less than 2 weeks ago. So we know the talent is there, but it is going to take a lot of refining. It was kind of a back to reality reminder that this guy's a rookie, that for he and the other young pitchers and young players, that success isn't going to come just instantaneously. It's still going to have to be earned. Casey Mize jumped straight from Double-A to the majors. So in a normal year, he's probably starting, 20 games at the Triple-A level. He probably comes up here a little more refined and polished. That being said, yeah, it's tough. I think it's tough on him mentally. It's going to cause him to look inward a little bit this season. It's got to be humbling. Same time, I think next spring training, it's going to be as exciting as ever to watch Casey Mize and see what he makes of this offseason time coming up.
On the other side of things, the offensive side of things last night, Miguel Cabrera, I feel like it would be wrong if we didn't talk about what he did last night. He accounted for all 6 runs that the Tigers scored. He had 2 3-run bombs on the night. And I swear, Cody, I was getting flashbacks to 2013. He looked really good. Was this encouraging for you to see?
Yeah, I think it was just a reminder that's still there with Miguel Cabrera. It was his second 2-home-run game this year. He has the lowest batting average of his career. Granted, he's hit the ball hard all year. His batting average on balls in play is also the lowest of his career. So there's been some bad luck. You look, he's up to 9 homers in 54 games. That actually would put him on pace for 27 in a 162 game season, which is pretty good. Is he 2012, 2013 Miguel Cabrera? Look, no. I mean, the guy's 37 years old. He's whiffing at the highest rate of his career. He's not going to be that elite hitter probably ever again, but this guy can still be really good. He can still be productive. It was something Lloyd McClendon talked about before the game. He said it's still in there, and that ended up being a little bit prophetic as we see Miggy, hit two mammoth homers, and it's just cool to see when that happens, that magic is still there. We get to see flashes of it from time to time. There's a guy who's worked hard to extend his career and hang on. You look at some of the numbers, especially for a guy who's limited to the DH spot. Yeah, he's kind of a zero WAR player, but he's up to 486, I believe, career home runs. This guy next year is going to have a shot to chase down 500 homers, 3,000 hits. And, I just think nights like yesterday make it cool to remember that we are still watching an all-time great, that we still get to see flashes of the fact he's a pretty special generational type talent. And yeah, maybe he's not the MVP caliber hitter that he once was, but this is still Miguel Cabrera, and the guy can still hit a baseball a long way.
Yeah, he was fun to watch last night, that's for sure. Cody, I do want to ask you about Ron Gardenhire as well. Obviously, last weekend, he decided to retire effective immediately, which kind of shook the entire Detroit sports community. I want to know from you, what was your personal experience like with Ron Gardenhire, and how did he impact the city of Detroit and really the Tigers baseball team?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to look back on the Gardenhire years as kind of underappreciated. Like, I think in a few years, assuming that this rebuild continues to kind of go according to plan, and if the Tigers are competitive again, I think we'll look back at 2019, 2020 as formative years where the foundation was kind of set for this organization. And when you look at these years, I don't know that anyone deserves as much credit as Ron Gardenhire. It would have been really easy for this train to go off the tracks last year when the Tigers lost 114 games. But you never really saw that clubhouse get negative. You never really heard much about drama. Generally, the mood was still pretty positive. Guys were fun to be around. Gardy showed up pretty much every day with a smile on his face, with a joke or two to tell, with a story to share. And just that attitude and his knack, right? His human feel for how to keep the vibe right in the clubhouse made a huge difference. This guy took over a tough job. He knew it was going to be a rebuild. He knew he probably wasn't going to win a lot of games, but I think his value to the organization was immense. Just because how many managers really could have had a similar impact, really could have kept that ship afloat, really could have kept the players believing in themselves through some really tough times. That's what countless players have talked about, how Gardenhire still made it fun to come to the ballpark every day. From a media perspective, it doesn't get much better than to deal with Ron Gardenhire, a guy who could take questions in stride, could be funny and entertaining, and really kind of one of the last of his generation, right? Just an old school baseball guy, but a guy you could sense the passion and his love for the game in pretty much every interaction with him. I think that also shines through in his tenure as a manager. Hopefully that's how he'll be remembered in Detroit. And like I said, hopefully in a few years, if all goes according to plan, Gardenhire's appreciated a little bit, even more than he is right now.
It was great having him here, even though it was that short period of time. Cody, I want to ask you about the rest of the starting pitchers. We talked a little bit about Casey Mize, and I guess let's say the staple starters. You've got Tarek Skubal, Matt Boyd, Spencer Turnbull, Michael Fulmer. You could throw Tyler Alexander in that mix, and Jordan Zimmerman made a start or two. Who were you most impressed with out of that bunch throughout this season?
Yeah, it's definitely been a huge year for Spencer Turnbull to build on some momentum he had last year, and especially in summer camp where suddenly he was looking like a pretty lights out dominant pitcher. And he's been the Tigers' best starter this year. This guy has an ERA under 4. There are periods where he's looked absolutely dominant. Still has a little bit of a tendency to lose control, maybe kind of overthink some things. But kind of crazy to remember this is just his second major league season. He's a little bit older than your typical second year player, but there's Spencer Turnbull has incredible stuff. If he can continue on this track of refining all that, you kind of wonder, what he could be. I think a lot of teams and just his reputation in the league has already really increased. Guys know that, opposing hitters aren't looking forward to facing Spencer Turnbull right now. You look at the rest of the rotation, it's obviously been a tough year for Matthew Boyd. You'd like to see him iron more things out. Michael Fulmer's return from Tommy John, it's been really tough. You wonder if he can turn that around next year. Like Casey Mize, Tarek Skubal has had some ups and downs, but I've been very impressed with what I've seen from Skubal, especially as he's had to deal with building up pitches, building up innings, kind of had a shortened workload this summer. Skubal has also looked dominant in flashes. He can just pound the zone with his fastball. You want to see those secondary pitches be a little more precise, but that's in there. So I think I'm really interested to see Tarek Skubal next year. I think he could have a terrific season. So I think Turnbull and Skubal are really the guys that have stood out to me.
Overall, the Tigers are a very young team. They had quite a few players make their MLB debut this season. So Cody, who is your rookie of the year?
Ooh, a tough question. I guess you got to go with Willie Castro, right, in the infield. This guy's hitting way over 300. Yeah, he has a lot of work to do defensively, but he made an MLB pipeline all-rookie team this year. It's actually kind of crazy if you were to ask me before the year who will be the Tigers Rookie of the Year. You'd probably think Casey Mize, maybe Isaac Paredes if we knew he was going to come up. So it's kind of been a pleasant surprise to see Willie Castro hit as well as he has. I know a lot of people in the Tigers organization believe in him and believe in his bat, but he's really been hot for more than a month now. He's hitting atop the order. He's really made a tremendous impact in the lineup. So I think credit to Willie Castro for that. It'll be interesting to see if he can continue that into next year.
It will be, like I said, a lot of young talent on this team. It'll be exciting in general to see what happens next season. But there were some veterans on this team too. Last offseason, the Tigers signed CJ Cron, Jonathan Scope, Cameron Maben, Austin Romine, and then there was Jorge Bonifacio, who was a minor league free agent. Unfortunately, obviously, we've got Cron and Scope who got bit with that injury bug. Very unfortunate to see them go down. But what do you expect out of these players for next season? Are they going to be on the Tigers roster?
That's one of the things I'm most interested to watch. Unfortunately, for a second year in a row, a lot of these one-year signings have been injured. But I think especially when you look on the infield, when you look at Austin Romine at catcher, maybe Crone at first base, and Scope at second base, the Tigers still have openings in those positions. I think all three guys in their time here made a positive impact. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see a ton of Crone, but I think they were all well thought of and played pretty dang well on the field. So for Al Avila and the rest of the Tigers front office, they'll have some decisions to make. Do you want to attempt to bring guys like that back? Could a guy like Jonathan Scope have played well enough to earn interest from other teams? Austin Romine's production has fallen off a little bit toward the second half of this season, but he's been a leader in the clubhouse. He's been a terrific pitch sequencer. I think a lot of his value is intangible at this point. So I would love to really see any of those three guys back. I think it makes sense given some of the organizational need at catcher, at first base, at second base. There's also just a lot to sort out in terms of what do the Tigers want this infield to look like next year. Are you going to leave Jeimer Candelario at first or move him to third? Do you start Isaac Paredes back in AAA or start him in the majors? These are some of the questions the Tigers are going to have to sort through this offseason, but I definitely think a few of these signings have made enough impact where there's a pretty strong case for attempting to bring them back.
I agree. Jonathan Scope was probably the injury. CJ Cron was very early in the season. He was doing well too, but Jonathan Scope for the end of the season here, that really was a killer for the Tigers. Cody, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I really appreciate it. Enjoy the last week of baseball season.
All right, sure thing, Daniella. You too.
And a big thank you to McLaren Health Care for presenting Brush Street Beat right here on the Word on Woodward.